being here. Really do appreciate it. How many veterans we have here? 1, 2, 3, 4. Do I have 4? 0. Great. Well, thank you very much for your service. I want you to know I served in the 113th Congress. I think most of you know that. And at the beginning, you weren't too happy, if I'm not mistaken. I had a lot of critics, but I want you to know it was okay because my biggest critic is my wife. Just to give you an example, I came home very proud and I showed her this list. I said, look, out of 435 members of Congress, only 8 scored 100% for cutting government waste, and your husband, yours truly, is on the top of the list. And she looked at that list and she said, that they printed that, well, oh shucks, I blew the joke, right? Okay, well anyway, they printed that list alphabetically. So, that's what she said. And before I went to Congress, unexpectedly, but I think it was divine intervention, we went to see that movie, Charlie Wilson's War. How many saw that movie? Charlie Wilson. Yeah, remember the movie? It's about Tom Hanks playing a congressman from Texas. He's a bit of a player, and he did this thing in Afghanistan, got us involved in Afghanistan. And there's a scene in the movie where he's in a hot tub with a bunch of beautiful babes. And the wife and I are driving home from the movie, and we're talking about it. This is just before I went to Washington, and she brought up that scene where he was in a hot tub with a bunch of beautiful babes, and she said, are you going to do that when you get to Washington? I said, look at his face, you think I got a chance? You know what she said? She says, you're right, I don't have anything to worry about. You know, I really enjoyed serving in Congress. We got a lot done. We passed 3 pieces of legislation, actually 4 if you consider, if you drive down 696, 275, I-75, you don't see any traffic cameras on federally funded highways. And one of the reasons was because of a bill that we never actually entered into the hopper on the floor of Congress. But we used a different technique. After being there 3 months, I passed my first piece of legislation. And then we passed 2 more in my short 2 years. But that one was kind of neat because what we did was we got a lot of flack from the Democrats because Washington, the city of Washington, is all federally funded highways or roads, right? Comes from Congress. So they didn't like the idea of removing the traffic cameras from those streets. And so the Democrats were up in arms, and even here, people said, you know, oh, we should be more worried about jobs here. Well, I am, because there's a lot of people on the left who want to put traffic cameras on federally funded highways because it's a revenue source for big government. And it actually is a real bane for truck drivers. Truck drivers, their whole livelihood is driving that truck, and if they get too many points because they went 1 mile an hour over the speed limit, which is exactly what would happen to you in Washington if you're a taxi driver and you went 1 mile an hour over the speed limit, you got a traffic fine in the mail. And it would take anywhere up to 24 months before you had your day in court. And the fine was over $180. And you know, for a taxi driver to get 1 mile an hour over the speed limit, $180 is a lot of money. So we decided, hey, let's do this, and we actually had all the horns blaring in Washington, D.C. from all the taxi drivers for about an hour. A gentleman from a Ron Paul supporter from Arizona, I forget his name, Sean. Do you know Sean?
Sean Dowell?
Sean Dowell, yeah. He was very instrumental in helping us get that bill actually inserted in the highway funding bill. And we don't get credit for it, but there's a gentleman by the name of Ronald Reagan that says, you don't always get credit, but as long as it gets done. And there is a stack about this high of all the newspaper articles criticizing the reindeer farmer Santa impersonator from Michigan who wanted to eliminate and keep traffic cameras off our federally funded highways. One small step to eliminating big government surveillance on our personal lives. The other one, thank you. The other one, an interesting story is that I didn't think Department of Education or the EPA should have a SWAT team. You know, seriously, the Department of Education was organizing and has a SWAT team. Well, I didn't see them in Sandy Hook and I didn't see them in Florida, did you? Okay, well, what is it for? So I actually got together with my team in Washington. We're going to submit a bill that says if you're a federal agency and you're not in the law enforcement business, like the Department of Justice or the FBI or the Secret Service, you shouldn't have a SWAT team. And so as we submitted the bill to the Legislative Council that writes the bills for us, they came back and said, hey, you should really get on to the bill from the gentleman from Utah who is actually doing the same thing. So I like to say that we actually had some real positive influence, because there's a lot of people in Washington that think just like you. And one of the proudest accomplishments I've had as a congressman is every single bill that we sponsored and actually passed came from ideas and suggestions from people just like you, not lobbyists. And for that, we won 2 constituent awards and great respect from a lot of our constituents. What we would do is you'd come to my office, you'd have an idea, we'd write it up, we'd talk about it, we'd investigate it, we would submit it to Legislative Council, and when we dropped the bill on the floor of Congress, and I don't mean literally drop it, we put it in a hopper, and before we put it in the hopper, the clerk gives us a number, and that's how we have you get those numbers, House Bill 3247, whatever it is, right? I would autograph that receipt that we get, we take the bill, and we put that receipt on a little plaque and present it to one of our constituents who gave us the idea. I think that's what representation is all about. What else? While we were there, I like to say we, because it's a team effort. It really is. It's not just the congressman. We like to tell people that, oh, we're going to solve all these problems. You know what? Anybody who gets up and tells you that is full of beans, because the best they can do is try, and try hard. And one of the things I like to look back on with great fondness is I had a hard time sleeping. I was so excited about being a congressman, getting into the next day's work. I would get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, I'd read the bills, and in my office by about 8 o'clock before any of my staff, and I was usually the last one to leave, somewhere about 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night, because my job was to read the bills. And I want to go back real briefly, because I remember this distinctly. I think it was this meeting, or when we met at the restaurant. What was the name of the restaurant?
Yes, we were at the train station.
Big Rock.
Big Rock.
Big Rock, right.
And we were in the Rathskeller.
And a little nervous being, a congressman, and having so many people coming in at me in every direction, including Liberty folks, because I wasn't a purist. A lot of Liberty folks like purists. They weren't willing to accept anything less than 100%. Well, I got news for you. You're never going to get 100% from too many people on all those things, because while you may think conservative review is excellent, other people think heritage is their record of how well you do at heritage is how they judge you. Like, I vote for only people who are right to life. Forget about everything else. I only vote for people who are Second Amendment supporters. I forget everything else. Well, it's the whole, because you have 705,000 people you represent. And you know how many issues there are? 705,000. And I remember distinctly, I came to one of those events at Black Rock, and it's pretty difficult to get to those when you work Monday through Friday in Washington, D.C., and you hold them on Thursday nights, right? And I went and gave a speech, and a bit nervous because, I was a bit nervous. And then a gentleman said, you voted for this bill, and he actually had the bill in his hand. And he showed me the bill, and he was highlighted. He had it yellowed. Is that not right, Dave?
I remember something like that.
Yeah, he had it highlighted. He said, why did you vote for this bill? And I'm totally embarrassed. I remember reading the bill, and I forget what it was, but it's something to do, maybe it was a farm bill or something close to it. And he showed it to me, and I go, I don't remember reading that in the bill. And so I went back to my apartment where I had a copy, and I went through this stack about this tall looking for that bill. Man, I'm really upset. Dave really caught me on this one. What do I got to do here? And I pulled it out, and I looked at my bill, and that clause he talked about wasn't even in the bill that I read. Yeah, and then I went down to the floor of Congress, and I talked to McCarthy, Majority Leader or Majority Whip at the time, I forget which. And I said, hey, one of my constituents gave me this bill, and he said, here's the bill we voted on, here's the bill I received. when did this paragraph get added? He says, oh, we did it that morning. Yeah, this is what they do in Washington, and you need somebody that knows all those tricks, right? And so what I did was, because of Dave Lanier, and this is when I say the ideas came from my constituents, suggestions and ideas came from my constituents, that was an idea or suggestion. So I entered a bill called the Read the Bills Act. Basically gave us 7 days to review the bill. And if you changed one thing, a period, a comma, or one word, we got another 7 days. The only exception was an act of war. And guess how far that went?
Nancy Pelosi.
How many co-sponsors do you think I got on? I didn't even get Justin Omash's co-sponsor.
God.
But Rand Paul said, hey, it's a good bill. He had a similar one, a little more complicated, but he had one. And you know, I'm very proud of the fact that we got a 93% conservative rating as my 2 years when, under probably some of the worst circumstances for any member of Congress, especially somebody who had never served in public office before. And one of the reasons is because I think, well, the House historian, and it's in the congressional record, he said, you were the most effective and successful freshman congressman in 50 years. And I looked at him, and Steve Stockman from Texas. Thank you. Steve Stockman from Texas and Chris Collins, who nominated Donald Trump for President of the United States at the Cleveland Convention, were standing there. And they were kind of shocked, and as I was. And we got to talking, and this gentleman, the historian, is kind of like, you remember the movie The Munsters with, I think it was Munsters, or The Addams Family with a guy named Lurch?
Oh, Lurch.
Yeah, Lurch. He was like this all the time, right? And he, this was the House historian. I mean, I was afraid to talk to him. And look, I'm a combat veteran, right? I was afraid to talk to this guy. And he was giving me all these nice compliments. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And then he asked, and I forget exactly how he worded it, but he said, what in your experience in your career do you think benefited you the most to be so effective as a congressman? And I looked at him with a straight face, and I said, well, I used to teach special ed for emotionally impaired children. Welcome to the left side. And that's pretty much it. You have to have patience and understanding. You have to have a good sense of humor. You have to be able to tell jokes. It's not just about going in and telling people what to do. It's about going in there and selling an idea or concept. And starting with small steps. Sometimes all you have to do is plant a seed. And that seed will go out and extend, and people will start learning, getting educated, and educating themselves, much like the Tea Party. The Tea Party, you know, what's going on? That's what it was. A bunch of people saying, what's going on with our government? What's this thing about the government taking control of my health care? What's this about the taxes? What's this? You know what? What makes a good congressman is a well-educated, informed constituency. And the more excited, or the more people ask me good, hard questions, the harder I started to work. And the harder, or the quicker I learned. And I want to go back. And a lot of people say, hey, Kerry, why do you want to go back there after what happened? And look, I had the time of my life. I was under a lot of pressure from a lot of different angles. And we still got 93% conservative rating. Rated the second most transparent member of Congress. 100% score for cutting government waste. And what else? So, guardian of small business, because that's what I believe it's all about, small business, right? And there's a couple other things. You got the report card, right? And one of the things I think that benefited me the most was I had a reliance on my boss. And my boss is that guy upstairs. And not too long ago, when I was thinking about running again, I go out on my deck and I pray. Every day before I go to bed, I go out on my deck. I don't care if there's a blizzard out there, and I look up at the sky and I pray. And I said, Lord, you know, I got a pretty good rating as a congressman when I served. And but what's more important is, what did I get with you? And I heard this voice. Vice President Pence isn't the only one who talks to you. And he said I got a 90%. I said, 90%? wow, what did I do? He says, well, you know, you missed a few Sundays, you had some thoughts you shouldn't have had, and you cussed a few times. I said, wow, I'm really sorry about that. I hope you forgive me. He said, you know, I will. You got 100%. Don't do it again. That's the benefit of my faith. And here's the thing, folks. I'm going to be quite frank with you because my #1 rule is never lie. Unless you ask me, of course, what size fish I caught the last time I went fishing, I may stretch the truth. But I want to go back. And I think I'm the only one running who actually can hit the ground running because I've been there and done that under some of the worst conditions. And one of my fellow soldiers said, Bentivolio, that's when you are the best at doing and accomplishing things when you're under a lot of pressure. And before I leave, I want to tell you a quick story. Now imagine you going up for the first time in your life behind the podium on the floor of Congress. You're notified a half hour before you have to go there and be the Speaker pro tem, the temporary Speaker. Banger, right? That's his place. Where the President of the United States gives his State of the Union address. And you're going to introduce this House speakers from the House of Representatives, people you've never met, the people you looked up to, you depended on, those you admired, and some probably not admired. Now, probably not so much. And I get down there and I have to stand in line and walk into the House of Representatives and get in front of C-SPAN cameras and introduce the first speaker. I have never, ever done that before. And the lady right here, the parliamentarian, she hands you the script. And it tells you exactly what you're going to say. And all she does is write in the gentleman or woman's name who you're going to introduce and where they're from. Like the gentleman, Billy Long from Missouri. Instead, my first day, I am a little sick. I just got off the plane. I'm feeling under the weather because it's cold. I can feel that I want to cough. I'm having trouble swallowing. My bones are shaking inside my skin. And I read it. The gentleman, Mr. Falio Menguga from American Somalia. That evening I was on a Rachel Maddow show. He can't even pronounce the guy's name, Falio Menguga from American Samoa. And she was absolutely right. Do you know how devastating that was to me? You know what? I laughed at it. I actually got up there in the front and did a terrible faux pas and promised I would never do it again. It didn't happen. So let me explain something. I'm a regular guy who had the opportunity to serve in Congress, and I think I did a hell of a job. And I'm a fighter and a warrior. I don't care how many times they knock me down, I'm going to get back up and I'm going to keep fighting. Because look, ladies and gentlemen, I'm fighting an enemy you need to fully realize. These are godless, baby-killing socialists who want us all to jump on a fast jet to Venezuela-style government. My opponents want to compromise. They're willing to take a slow boat, a bus, or goose step there. Me, I want to cancel the trip. Ladies and gentlemen, this 17th March, I have a fundraiser. We have another one at the Huron Valley Gun Range on the 26th if you prefer to shoot. It's a state-of-the-art gun range. We'd like you to be there. I'd also like your support, whether you're in this district or in my district or not. You need to get out there because the real enemy is not our fellow Republicans. Our real enemy are those people who will stop at nothing to change this style of Americanism into a socialist government. They want you to go to the political boss and get permission for everything you do. I'm not interested in playing that game. My position on gun control, by the way, and I practice what I preach, is my legs are shoulder width apart and I have a firm grip. I was a school teacher in a public school teaching history and English and computer-aided design, highly qualified by the state in vocational and general ed and by the school. And look at, the weaponization of the EPA, the IRS going after Tea Party groups. It's not just the federal agencies. It's in the schools. As a school teacher, when they found out I had an R after my name, every other week I got written up. And one, they take everything out of context and spin it. They accused me of sexually harassing a female student because I asked her what her natural hair color was. Well, if you put it in proper context, it would be pure innocent. That particular day, her hair was purple. The week before it was orange. And the week before that it was green or something like that. You know who I'm talking about, right? This is how they will spin the truth. They don't know the truth. They are robotic, I don't know what you want to call them, socialist,
Idiots.
well, I don't want to say that, but special ed students. But you know what? Honestly, special ed students that I taught are a lot smarter. They have some critical thinking skills. They're some of the best kids I ever had. And I loved every one of them. You have to have patience and understanding. And that's the key. But with some of these people I'm learning, you can't have, no matter what patience, no matter what you try to understand them, they only want their thing, their issue. And a thing that I see, it reminds me of a spoiled child who throws a temper tantrum if they don't get their way. Do you ever see those kids? Imagine them in adult form. That's what we're fighting, ladies and gentlemen. I'm a warrior. I think I've proven my worth as no experience prior to serving in Congress. I've done the job. I kept the faith. And I want you to keep that faith too, and I want to go back and fight again. Now, I'm not going to promise you we're going to win every battle, or I'm going to be perfect. But I am sure in hell going to try and get better to the 93% conservative rating. Because now I can hit the ground running. And there's a lot of people in Washington waiting for me to come back to join and get in the fight. Because they know I can do it. I had 2 years experience there, and I think we kicked ass. Can I say that?
You just did.
Okay, kicked ass and take names. And a lot of people are saying, Bentivolio, you're not going to have the money. Well, April 15th is my reporting day for the FEC, for Federal Elections Commission, and I'm sure you're all going to be pretty happy about the numbers you see coming from former Congressman Kerry Bentivolio. And when it comes time to fight the Democrats, we're going to grab them by the nose and we're going to kick them in the butt. We're going to go through them like, well, crap through a goose. Thank you very much. God bless you. Yes, sir.
Kerry, quick question right now in the Senate.
I hate your questions. They're so difficult. You're so smart.
You are smooth, man. You are smooth. I don't even live in your district, but there's the effort right now, the Sanders-Lee resolution.
The what?
The Sanders-Lee resolution. And what they're saying is to withdraw all U.S. support for the Saudis' war of aggressive genocide against the people of Yemen. They tried something similar in the House, and I believe the Speaker wouldn't let it go forward. But apparently in the Senate, it's a little bit different situation. If that were to come up, your thoughts on that? Would you vote to say you can't do this? And by the way, if you think you want to do something like that, you got to come to us for proper congressional authorization under the Constitution, like a declaration of war or something of that nature. What are your thoughts on that? Yeah, and it's very complicated because I want to. I really haven't read up on that issue. I remember reading something about it a couple of weeks ago. Okay, but let me just say this on that. When Obama wanted to he said they crossed the red line in the sand. I wrote an op-ed in the Detroit News that ended up on the front page of Real Clear Politics that basically said that you can't invade a foreign country with limited airstrikes. You just can't do that. It's an act of war. And then later when we were voting on the floor of Congress to give the president the authority for limited airstrikes in Syria, I told my colleagues that I couldn't do it. They said, why not? It's just limited airstrikes. I said, well, tell the Japanese that when they invaded the Pearl Harbor. It's limited airstrike. Come on. And the gentleman, I told him to the last one, he kind of went like this, and he started thinking about it, and I almost positive he was going to change his vote to from a yes to a no, and so go along with me. But the bell rang, And after the bell rings, if you change your vote, it's recorded. And he didn't want it recorded as a changed vote. Another gentleman I really ticked off in Congress when we were very pros going after Syria. I just started singing, well, come on, all you big, strong men, Uncle Sam needs your help again. Got himself in a terrible jam way down yonder in Vietnam. We'll put down your books and pick up a gun. We're going to have a whole lot of fun. And he didn't appreciate that. But I told him, I said, did you ever fight in war? And he said, no. I said, well, I have. I'm the only member of Congress who served in both Vietnam and Iraq. And I'm contrary to some of what my opponents have said. I have served in Vietnam. I have served in Iraq. I know what it's like to serve in war, actual combat. Few people will say that. I have. Who did I give it to? Ah, here. As promised, for the record, this is my DD Form 214. If any of you veterans would like to take a look at it and see that it is in fact real, it has 2 bronze stars on it, service in Vietnam and in Iraq. And yeah, I know what it's like to put your buddies. I know what it's like to put your I want you to know that I know what it's like to put your buddies in a body bag. And when my soldiers in my National Guard unit received orders to go to Iraq, I handed them each a nice little souvenir, and that was a small bottle of Vicks Vapor Rub. Have you ever seen that? The little small bottles? Do you know what it's for?
No.
Body stench.
Oh, to keep the.
What was it for?
Body stench.
Yeah,
Thank you.
so you don't smoke.
If you stuff it up your nose, you won't have that lasting effect, right? And you'll be able to eat later, correct? You were a police officer. You know what it's like.
I work in a funeral home.
Yeah. Yeah. So when they looked at me like that, I saw the blood drain from their face when they realized that, and these are National Guardsmen who said for 15 years, Bentivolio, we don't need to train like that. We'll never go to war. And in 2004, they were deployed to Iraq in Baghdad as military policemen. This is an artillery unit. And the worst job I ever had was taking one of my soldiers, picking him up at Dover, and escorting his body to his home in Ovid, Michigan. And that was the hardest job that I've ever had, because I felt as the master gunner for the battalion, I was responsible to train those troops to survive on a battlefield. And that was my failure. Yes, sir?
Don't you think if a war were actually declared by Congress, since none of these countries that we've been fighting wars with have ever been a threat to us, to our personal, to our shores or our borders, there hasn't been a war declared since the Second World War where Congress declared the war. The Constitution requires that any battle that we go to war, where we go to war with a foreign country, has to be declared by Congress. Just think of the lives we would have saved and the money we would have saved if we would have followed that constitutional
We wouldn't be worried about those potholes in our roads if we didn't have to intervene in every single conflict in the world. Okay. The biggest problem you have is there's, how can I say this? One of my favorite people said this. He says, millions for defense, but not 1 penny for empire. Do you remember who said that? Who said that?
Reagan?
Ron Paul?
No.
Ronald Reagan?
No, it was
Robert Taft?
senator from Arizona, ran for president.
Oh, Barry Goldwater.
Barry Goldwater said that. I think it was Barry Goldwater. He said, millions for defense, but not 1 penny for empire. Ladies and gentlemen, it's easy, I guess, for a politician who's never served to send some stranger off to war. But, how much time do I have? Do I have about 8 more minutes?
Well, yeah,
We're done?
yeah, whenever you're finished.
Okay, well, I have 8 more minutes. Let me tell you, real briefly. Let me tell you something. It's about leadership by example, doing the right thing no matter what. And the reason I guess I believe that, my principles are already bought and paid for by a lot of people. My grandfather fought in World War I when he got off the boat. My father and uncles fought in World War II. A gentleman across the street from where I lived was on an aircraft carrier that was hit by a kamikaze in World War II, and the gentleman to the left of us, Mr. Charles Parker Sr. in Royal Oak, got his Purple Heart in Iwo Jima, and his son, my best friend, Charles Parker Jr., his name is inscribed on the Vietnam War Memorial not far from my house, or from my house office building. And the gentleman to our right, I don't remember his name, but I do remember his daughter, Cookie, because she gave me my first kiss. And he fought in the Korean War, and there were two gentlemen further down the street that were in Patton's Third Army when they relieved the 101st at Bastogne. I remember a president of the United States, a Navy veteran, who said, "Ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country." Thank you. But I think what best sums it up, why I served and why they served, is found in the movie Saving Private Ryan. If you remember the movie, it opens up an elderly gentleman walking down the sidewalk. His family's not far behind. The scene changes to a boat off the beaches of Normandy. All kinds of hell on the beaches. The Battle of Normandy, D-Day invasion. He finally gets what's left of his small company, gets orders to go find this young Private Ryan whose three brothers were killed within weeks of each other, one right there on the beaches at Normandy. He's got to bring him home. Historical fiction. So Tom Hanks, playing Captain Miller, goes through this horrific battles again to find this Private Ryan, with two of his soldiers dying in the process. The last battle, most of them are killed except for one or two, I believe. After they find Private Ryan, Captain Miller gets his mortal wound, and he's got his back against a motorcycle, and he's looking up at young Private Ryan, and he says, "Earn this. Earn it." And you see Private Ryan's face change from the young man in World War II to the elderly gentleman we met at the beginning of the movie. And he's in front of a headstone that reads, "Captain Miller, 2nd Rangers." And he falls to his knees and says, "Not a day goes by that I don't remember what each of you have done for me. I hope, at least in your eyes, I have done the right thing." Ladies and gentlemen, those are the people I serve. Maybe historical fiction, but it has a very strong message that I truly believe in. Those are the guys. They weren't all Republicans. They weren't all Democrats. They're just people trying to find the American dream and serving their country. And that's what it's about. It's about service. It's not about being an elitist politician, wait on me hand and foot. That's the biggest problem I had. A lady came up to me and says, how's it feel to be a VIP now, Congressman Bentivolio? I looked at her and I said, "Ma'am, I'm having a real hard time with it." She says, "Why is that?" It's because I ran for office, because I thought you were a VIP. God bless you. Thank you very much.